Okay, welcome again. It's me again, Jules Grandsayer from the European Astronaut Center. Welcome everyone in this unique place where astronauts, not only of Europe, but also all over the world, train. And I get a big signs from my colleagues here who tell me we are live on the web as well. So I'm also saying hello to a global audience. We're part today of a global event, and so we're in the global conversation. With us today, a veteran of 2 space flights, the first ever European commander of the International Space Station, and now the head of the European Astronaut Center. Please welcome Frank De Winne. Also with us, the ESA's Director for Human Spaceflight and Robotic Exploration, David Parker. And a special guest since this is the European Astronaut Center. The next ESA astronaut to fly in space, someone who's been recruited at the same time as Tim Peake in 2009, French ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet. And it's a true pleasure to have you here. It's an even bigger pleasure because we have someone special here, someone that everyone came to see today, someone who's just spent 186 days working and living on board the International Space Station, of which almost 5 hours he spent outside of the space station working there. This is British ESA astronaut Tim Peake. Okay, standing ovation. So guys, you can sit down. And we'll, Frank, I'll just leave the mic to you for a short word of welcome. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, also on my behalf, thank you very much here in the European Astronaut Center, the home of all European astronauts, and also where we make human spaceflight and space exploration happen. Not the only place, of course, but one of the unique places in Europe where we make it happen. Tim is here today because he was the 3rd astronaut to directly return after his landing here to the European Astronaut Center. It's what we call the direct return, and I'm very happy to say that this was now a routine operation for the first time. The first 2 times it was more kind of a test phase, but we have now entered into routine operations, and it shows the capabilities that we are continuously building here in Europe and in the European Astronaut Center. Of course, we cannot do this alone, so I would like to thank the partners who helped us with us. I see a lot of people from DLR here and from NVHAP, the great medical facility just next door where we do all the science activities with him and the medical tests with him. So without them, it would certainly not be possible. So thank you very much, the team of NVHAP. And also, I see some of the military people here. We have, of course, special access and direct access to the military airport just here next door, which makes the direct return very comfortable for our astronauts. So I would also like to thank our colleagues from the military airport. Last but not least, the partners. Tim is doing a lot of science, not only science for ESA, but also for our international partners, NASA, JAXA, and CSA, our Canadian friends. They are also here and they work in the NVHAP facility to do all the life science experiments that we have conducted throughout this mission. So also thank them for their support and for coming over here. And last but not least, of course, the whole ESA team, a lot of people here standing on the balcony that are sitting in the audience and that have worked very hard over the last couple of days to make this direct return a success and to give you all the opportunity to talk to Tim. So ESA team, thank you very much. Well done, guys. And with this, I would like to give the word to Dave, who is going to introduce a little bit the importance of this mission in the larger context of our exploration activities in Europe.
Thanks, Frank, and hopefully so a few slides will appear. I know you're all here to talk to Tim and find out about his mission, and I can't possibly describe it 100th as well as he's going to be able to. But what I wanted to do was place his mission in the context of our whole program, our human spaceflight program, our exploration program for the future. Because this is a really important year for the European Space Agency. We're going to have one of our so-called ministerial conferences explain that and show how Tim's mission has contributed to it. Because of all the space activities, exploration is probably the one that is most exciting. It's driven by the combination of curiosity and opportunity, the curiosity to go out there and discover, and the opportunity to bring back to planet Earth discoveries that have a value to us. And only 2 years ago, member states of the European Space Agency, the ministers, agreed our new strategy for space exploration. It's built around 3 destinations: low Earth orbit, the Moon and Mars. Low Earth orbit has obviously demonstrated its value as a place to live and work through the International Space Station. And the Moon has immense scientific value and as a potential for future science because of the discoveries we've made since the days of Apollo, because there's so much more to discover. The key science target is potential for past or present life. But whilst exploration without science is just tourism, exploration is much more. It's also about the innovation, the technology we can bring back. It's the great proving ground for technologies like life support systems, energy, robotics. It's innovation for our common good. And everything we do in exploration is in international cooperation. And nothing more than the space station demonstrates the value in these difficult times of the potential of humanity working together on a common goal. And our future definitely depends on the citizens, exciting the citizens of tomorrow with the values of teamworking and the positive impact of science and technology on society. And the European Astronaut Corps certainly embody those ideals. Of course, you're here today to hear from Tim, but I wanted especially to have the opportunity to prove that Tim is part of a team. And that's why Thomas is here. He's our next astronaut going to the International Space Station towards the end of this year and continuing the work that Tim has been doing. But it's vital to say that their missions are part of a wider vision of space exploration. So I'm going to say a little bit about what's coming in the future and what the opportunities are and decisions to be made in the conference that will happen in Lucerne at the end of this year. We have 3 goals, very simply, to align the projects we're doing to that strategy that ministers agreed a couple of years ago. We call it an envelope program, a single framework to join together our ambitions in robotic and human spaceflight and plot a roadmap for the next decade of discovery. A second decision, absolutely key this, is whether Europe wants to join the other 4 partners in the space station program in continuing operations beyond 2020 and out to 2024. We think the answer should be yes. And thirdly, we need to complete the ongoing projects and plan for the future. So there's a really exciting menu of projects that go beyond already in hand and coming along. So think of it, in 2018, the whole world will be watching when NASA launches the first of the Space Launch Systems, this giant rocket, bigger than anything we've seen since the days of Apollo. And on board that will be the first Orion service module built here in Europe, our first human-rated spacecraft. Later, a second unit will be launched with astronauts to go round the moon and return them back to Earth, the first deep space voyage for more than 50 years. Meanwhile, astronauts will continue to serve aboard the space station doing really important science. Coming closer to time, in October, our ExoMars mission, which is nearly halfway on its journey to Mars right now, will arrive, go into orbit and deploy its lander onto the surface of Mars. And then we're looking forward to the ExoMars rover mission in 2020, the first dedicated life search mission ever attempted. But it's not just that. We've got the moon as well. We're well underway now, drawing on the heritage of Rosetta and Philae and ExoMars to build technology to go to the surface of the moon with the Lunar Resource mission in 2021. And then finally, and perhaps most tantalizing, what are we going to do in human spaceflight into the future? We have an exciting possibility that the space station partners, including ESA, are talking about right now. And I want to show how that links back to Tim's mission. Let me take you on a thought experiment about 10 years into the future. After 25 years of service, the International Space Station is coming to the end of its life. But now, 1,000 times further out in space, a new star has risen. A human outpost in deep space, located far out, where the Earth and Moon's gravity balance, a kind of crossroads in space. This is our deep space habitat, our new place to live and learn how to work in space, a kind of base camp for exploring the solar system and reaching back down to the surface of the Moon. An international crew of 4 are demonstrating how to live on the minimum of resources, perhaps the most environmentally friendly community ever, using solar power for energy, growing food to eat, and recycling water and waste. They are testing technologies for protecting future astronauts from deadly radiation on their journey to Mars and back. And their ship uses electric propulsion to undertake shakedown cruises into deep space. They shuttle to and from it with that Orion vehicle I mentioned earlier. They can look down on the Moon and untroubled by humans for more than 50 years. We want to go back there. We've barely scratched the surface of the discoveries to be made. So imagine ESA has sent a rover to the surface of the Moon. It's going to go into the dark, shadowed craters of the Moon to discover the water, the frozen materials that might help our astronauts live on the Moon in the future. Its progress is being watched by an astronaut, an astrogeologist, back aboard the space habitat, safe aboard. When the rover's job is done, when it's gone into the dark places, taken its samples, they can be launched back to the deep space habitat and put on the next Orion going home. Is this all science fiction? Well, no, this is exactly the scenario that Tim demonstrated about 6 weeks ago when with a Meteoron experiment that we did, which involved the International Space Station, ESA's control centres, and the Airbus Mars Yard in the UK. And if our ministers agree, it is the vision that we want to make a reality. And I think it would be a great legacy from Tim's mission. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So back on Earth now. We said it, Tim, 186 days in space. It's been almost 3 days on Earth, not entirely. How do you feel right now?
Thank you, Jules. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better than I did on Saturday lunchtime, that's for sure. But what's amazing is, again, how quickly the human body adapts to a new environment. And it's something I experienced when I first went up into space and was amazed after just 24 hours living on board the space station how quickly I was able to function. It's a bit slower coming the other way, I can tell you, and it's a bit harder. But after 3 days, I've just been doing some rehabilitation training with our team here at EAC and doing some cycling, some cross-trainer, some balance exercises. So even just after 3 days, I'm feeling fantastic.
Well, thank you. We'll go through the room with the first questions here. We'll start here.
Tim, welcome back. Would you do it again? And if you did it again, what does your wife think of that?
Thank you, David. Yes, I would do it again in a heartbeat, and I can say that happily because I've already spoken to my wife about it, and she's extremely supportive. And you know, of course, I'd like to put the family first for a while now, and life is all about having a balance. And as a father and a husband, the balance now is to have some family time. But working and living on board the International Space Station is the best place you could possibly wish as a professional to be. You're in an environment where you're so well supported, you're very aware that you're doing absolute cutting-edge technology. In one day, you may be touching 6 or 7 experiments in one day, and you're very aware that these experiments are the result of hundreds, if not thousands of people in each of their areas of speciality, and you're the person who's executing this and running the experiment in low Earth orbit. So it's a hugely privileged place to work, and that is very rewarding and very satisfying, so I would go back in a heartbeat.
That's good news for us. Thomas.
Tim, hi, Thomas from Sky News. You're looking a lot better than when I saw you in Carrigander Airport, I can say. Tell me, describe the descent. We know about the mechanics, but what was going through your mind? What were you seeing? What were you smelling? What were you hearing? What was going through your mind as all this was going on?
The descent is a really exciting ride. And it, you know, you've got two minds really. One is as a professional, and certainly as a test pilot, I was really wanting to analyze the spacecraft, thinking about the dynamics of what was happening. But at the same time, you can't help the sort of boy inside you that's enjoying this fantastic ride back from space. And we have practiced this so much, we've trained for it in Star City, so you're very aware of everything that's going to happen. And in actual fact, the undocking is fairly uneventful, and the first couple of orbits in space are uneventful. You're just waiting for that deorbit burn. And it's from the deorbit burn onwards that things get really exciting. And, you know, the deorbit burn is quite a gentle burn, so it's not like you feel a huge amount of deceleration during that. But if things are going to go wrong on landing, they will probably go wrong during that deorbit burn. So it's somewhere where you're very, very aware of controlling all the systems and making sure everything's functioning normally. Because if that burn goes long or if it goes short, you're going to miss your target and your re-entry profile will be very different from what it should be. But I was aware, having spoken to lots of astronauts about the descent, what to expect. Separation was very dynamic. And again, in my previous military career, I have had the pleasure of flying some Russian helicopters. And so I'm very familiar with Russian engineering and Russian technology, and it's robust. It works very well, but it's very solid. And when a solid spacecraft is designed to break into 3 parts, it doesn't do it quietly. It does it with a number of pyrotechnic bolts that all go off one after the other, sounding like a very heavy machine gun. And the spacecraft really does blow itself apart, which is really quite exciting to be in the center of this. And these pyrotechnic bolts are, you know, only a few millimeters of metal away from your ear when they go off. And then from then on, the spacecraft is tumbling in a fairly controlled manner, just waiting to enter the Earth's atmosphere. But also, it's great being sat next to the window because you're able to look out. And at that point, I started seeing sparks and flames coming off because all of the multi-layer insulation around the spacecraft is burning away. So it's very exciting to see that. And again, I was warned about that and told that's absolutely normal. Expect to see flames coming past the window. Waiting for the Gs to build up. You haven't really entered the Earth's atmosphere, but you're down at almost 100 kilometers. And I looked out the window, and having spent 6 months watching planet Earth from 400 kilometers in a very controlled attitude, to look out the window and see Earth approaching at 100 kilometers in what looked like a fairly uncontrolled attitude was really quite surprising. And you really get a very strong sensation that you are just falling back to the planet. And then the Gs start to build up. And the Gs actually come on fairly slowly, so you get plenty of time to get used to that. But towards the end, you are doing 4.5 Gs, which after 6 months of zero gravity is quite a lot. So you're having to control your breathing and work on that. But you know, the capsule, it gets very hot, extremely hot. And so you're working hard against the G, you're working hard against the heat. Your visors are down, you don't have much ventilation inside. You're having to read the systems as well and check the spacecraft. So there's an awful lot going on, and at the same time, you're trying to memorize the experience. But no, it's a wonderful ride, and then probably the most dynamic part is when the parachute opens, the drogue chute, and you get about 20 seconds where the capsule is being completely flung around, and you just have to really hold on and wait for it all to stop. I was told actually that would stop with a big jolt as the main chute opened, but in our case it didn't. The main chute must have been a very gentle opening, so I wasn't even aware that the main chute had opened. And the clock was running, and I'm very aware of exactly what should happen, exactly what time, and the time had gone beyond the point at which the main chute had opened. So for a second I was concerned. I looked across to Yuri, and he was just sat there so relaxed and cool as he always is. I thought, well, if we didn't have a main parachute opening, he wouldn't be looking as cool as that. So I was quite comfortable at that stage that we must be under the main canopy. And then you get a few moments of respite where you can gather your thoughts and get yourself ready for the landing.
Tim, Dominic Reynolds, 5 News. Welcome back. Nice to see you. Astronauts who've been to space in the past have said that once you come back to Earth, it's a slightly different Earth, that it feels different, that it might smell different. Is that what you've experienced?
Do you know, not really for me. It's lovely, it's wonderful, it's familiar. It's everything that I missed when I was in space, and it's very true what people say. You know, when you're on Earth, you wish you're in space, and when you're in space, you wish you're on Earth. So you do think about Earth a lot when you're in space, and you do miss the fresh air and the smells and everything. So no, it's nice to be back in a very familiar environment. And I meant what I said about the rain. It's something that you don't feel up there. Obviously, you don't feel any weather. So any weather down here whatsoever feels unique, and it feels very special.
Another question here in the front.
Palab Ghosh. Welcome back, Tim. On the 25th anniversary of her spaceflight, Helen Sharman said to us that she hoped you weren't the last British astronaut, and she wanted the UK government to make a further commitment to human spaceflight. Would you agree with her? Do you want the British children that you've inspired to be able to follow in your footsteps, should they wish to?
I would agree wholeheartedly, really, and to echo Dave's words as well about where we're going. I mean, you've heard about the exciting future ahead. Life doesn't stop with the International Space Station, and already the European Space Agency is so active and so involved with such a successful human spaceflight program, and then to look forward to from beyond low Earth orbit to the Moon and to Mars and exploration of the solar system. It's extremely important the UK is involved in all of that. And we need to be involved now. And we need to give our industry a chance to develop what they need to support human spaceflight. We need to give our scientific community a chance as well to get on board with the microgravity science and the other research that we're doing for these future missions. And if we're not involved now, then we are simply going to miss the boat. And we have a huge space sector. It's very dynamic in the UK. It's growing at a vast rate. And it's going to be an incredibly successful space sector. But to make it even more so, we need to be continuing our contributions to human spaceflight, and we certainly need to be inspiring those young minds that hopefully I've touched a few during this 6 months to show them that, look, you can be an astronaut and you can join the European Space Agency and you can go to the moon.
Zulfikar Rabbani here from Deutsche Welle, Germany's international broadcaster. Tim Peake, welcome back. You've made it all the way back to Earth. We're in Europe. I've got to ask you the obvious question. Are you going to stay or are you going to go? Which way are you going to vote? We want to know, I mean, following on from, what you've been saying in terms of European space exploration, how do you feel about that?
It is an important decision to make, obviously. It's very important for the UK. And so, Thursday is a huge day. But voting is a very personal thing, and I'm somebody who believes that voting should remain a private choice. So I'm not here to tell you which way I'm going to vote on Thursday.
I will tell you if I can still vote.
Another one here.
Hi Tim, Georgina Campbell from the Oxford Mail. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Georgina.
I was just wanted to know how important is the Harwell campus in Oxfordshire to Britain's role in sort of space exploration and scientific discovery?
The Harwell campus is really important. I've loved visiting there, and I look forward to the next visit there as well, which I hope will be fairly soon. It's really a central hub in the UK for what we're doing in so many areas of our cutting technology, and certainly in our space sector. It's a very exciting place to visit. It's a very dynamic place to visit as well. And of course, now that the European Space Agency has its base on the Harwell campus as well, gives it that extra element. So no, I'm delighted with what's going on there, the work that's going on there. I really look forward to going back there very soon. Absolutely.
You hear another question from David?
Tim, you took some incredible photographs while you were up there. Do you have a favourite picture that you brought back with you? And did you prefer looking down at Earth or out at space?
It's a very good question, and I haven't had a chance really to look through them all. There are probably about 5 favourites I think I've got, and the interesting thing is that those favourite photographs were completely unplanned. They were the ones where I was brushing my teeth one night and just thought, hey, why not brush my teeth in the cupola and look out? And suddenly saw the Milky Way like I've never seen it before, and grabbed the camera and got a shot of it. and they're the ones that are really special. A sunset that you just happen to capture. I mean, there are plenty of photographs of Earth, and things like capturing the pyramids are very satisfying as well, because that's pretty hard to do from a vehicle that's moving at 25 times the speed of sound. So it's nice when you can capture something that you've been wanting to get a photograph of. But I'd say the really special ones are those where I wasn't expecting to get anything, and you're suddenly rewarded with a wonderful aurora or a thunderstorm, something like that.
Yeah, another one question here.
Aline Radix, Kölner Stadtanzeiger. Hello. Welcome back, Tim. I just wondered whether you have time to dream at the ISS. I know that you're busy working all day long, so in Germany they say the first thing you dream on a new surrounding will come true. So what did you dream on ISS?
Oh, I see. You're actually meaning really to dream, as in when you're asleep. I thought you meant sort of metaphorically, but which is actually a really good question in both cases, because you have to make time to dream on the space station, as in to be very aware of your situation, because something we do, all of us as human beings, is we normalize everything in order to be able to function. And that's the first thing you do on board the space station, is you make it normal. Because if you realized where you were and what you were doing with this huge wow factor, you simply couldn't function on a day-to-day basis. So you get up in the morning, you make a cup of tea, you have a bacon sandwich, and you go to work. And it's normal, because it has to be normal, otherwise we can't work. But if you do that day after day after day, you know, you need to make time to be able to say, hang on a second, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes here and just sit in the cupola and realize where I am, look out, and or you know, wherever it might be around the space station, that you need to take that time to reflect on your position and enjoy it. In terms of actual real dreams at night, I didn't dream very much at all in space, and at first my dreams were of being back on Earth, and then you kind of get mixed weird dreams towards the end where you're on Earth but you're floating around in buildings, and you're clearly in zero gravity. It gets a bit messed up.
I've got that dream all the time, by the way. This is Thomas.
Tim, when I spoke to Rebecca in Baikonur on launch day, and I asked her whether you were cool dad for the boys, she said, well, actually, there's another kid at the same school whose dad is in the NFL, and that trumped you. Has it dawned on them the magnitude of what you've done over the last 6 months?
They're very aware. They're much more aware now, certainly than they were last year. But you know, we're all down to earth as a family. Excuse the pun, but you know, we have to be. You make everything normal, and we make everything normal as a family. And so yes, they're aware that going to space was a fairly big event, and it was fairly special. But at the same time, go and show them a fire truck, and they'll be far more excited.
Tim, I feel like nobody else is going to ask this, so I will. What's it like using an Earth toilet again?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we do look forward to, actually, is gravity is horrible when you come back to Earth, except in a few cases, and using the loo, gravity is your friend.
I thought we said no toilet questions.
Tim, pupils from Westbourne Primary School, your old school, are watching this, as are thousands of children, I'm sure, across the UK. What would you say to them?
I mean, firstly, I'm so thrilled that so many children throughout the UK and Europe as well have joined in this mission. And I know there's an awful lot of people to thank who have made that work, in particular Libby, who's sitting behind you. Because I think we've had, you know, one of the most successful educational outreach campaigns during this mission that we've ever seen, and we've reached over 1 million school children, which is just phenomenal. And I've loved every single minute of it. All of the competitions we've had, from the naming competition, from the patch design competition on Blue Peter, through to space dinners and the fitness competitions, the rocket seeds. There's been so many. And really, I'm delighted that they've got involved. I'm delighted that they've been encouraged and been inspired to look at space and to look at science in a different way. And I hope it does encourage them to continue their interest in science. But I think the message to take away from it is, you're looking at a boy who went to Westbourne Primary School, who left school at the age of 19 with 3 below-average A-levels, and I've just got back from a 6-month mission to space. So my message to them is, look, don't let anybody tell you you can't do anything.
Ouais. Very nice.
And all sorts of important people to meet. Are you going to go and visit the school children as well that followed your mission?
Absolutely, I'm definitely going to visit the school children, and I'm going to visit Great Ormond Street Hospital as well. I had a wonderful opportunity to show children there who are very sick from the hospital around the space station. They joined me on a tour of the space station, which was wonderful. So I want to go and visit them, and I want to go and visit as many school children as I can as well. Obviously, everything has to be fitted into a very busy schedule, and the next 6 months are incredibly busy, but hopefully there will be time for that as well.
That's a wonderful message to the kids. I heard there are a lot of messages from the kids to you, Tim, and there's someone here to prove that. It's Michael. Michael, you have something for Tim, I believe. If you could just...
A whole bunch of cards from kids at various schools in the UK. They've been doing... The kids have been doing an awful lot of work, not just with the science, but also with physical education and all sorts of artistic and creative things. And I know that they've been particularly busy with the Space to Earth Challenge, doing the triathlon things that you've been doing up in space with them. And I think even the Brownlee brothers are getting in on this and making a Space to Earth Challenge theme soon. And what they'd like to know is, what are your plans for exercise and so on in the coming months?
Well, Patrick may even be around here somewhere. He can probably tell you better than I can, because he's the man he's the man up there who controls my fitness and training schedule for the next few months. But it's very important to go through the correct rehabilitation. In the 6 months, we've been able to exercise kind of the major muscle groups using the machines on board the space station. But I was very surprised to come back to Earth and you look at yourself in the mirror. It's like, wow. I mean, I'm only 2 kilograms off my launch weight, so it's not like I've lost a huge amount of weight. But the distribution of weight and your muscles are very different. It's very obvious to see that the small stabilizing muscles, your frame is different. So that all needs to be built back up and get back to work normally. So there'll be a whole mixture: cycling, running, swimming, just to get myself fully back to adapted to Earth's gravity. And thank you very much, Lise. I love it. Welcome home, Tim. How was it, mate? I mean, that's brilliant. It was great.
Question for Spaceflight magazine. You said you would want to fly again. Would you want another long duration mission, or maybe Orion flight, or maybe a commercial flight with SpaceX? Or
I think, as an astronaut, any mission is a good mission. So you can't afford to get fussy. They don't come around very often. So you take anything you can get. Another long duration mission, absolutely. I mean, I think a dream would have to be a lunar exploration mission. I don't think any astronaut would turn that down at all. That has to be, yeah, Frank, I'll be fighting Frank for it, yeah. No, I mean, any mission is a good mission.
Any other question here from the audience? No? No one saying the line? No more questions? Seriously. So I'll ask one question if there's no more questions. Yeah? Okay? Oh, here. Okay. Oh, I have to wait for my question then.
Tim, a lot's changed in the last 6 months since you've been away. Britain's arguing over Europe. Donald Trump might be heading to the White House. Did you ever think, I might just stay up here?
Well, I did say it's a great place to live and work. I mean, of course, the one thing you really miss is friends and family. And 6 months is a long time to be away, a very long time to be away. So I was happy it was time to come home for those reasons. But no, as I said, you could easily stay up there. It's a great place to live and work.
Tim Peake, Sarah Cruddas. What does it mean to you to have been able to achieve this and actually live your dream and show, as you said, that young people can do anything and that everything is possible if you put your mind to it?
It means a huge amount. There's no guarantee of a space flight, and so you're very well aware, as you're going through your training. One of our old bosses used to say to Thomas and I all the time, it's better to have a space flight ahead of you than behind you. I'm like, no, it's better to have one space flight behind you, because until you've got it, you don't know that you're going to get it, and things can go wrong. So I'm just very happy that, I've had a mission, which is a huge privilege, and the fact that I've hopefully been able to use it to share the mission as well with other people, which was the whole intention, to try and share it as much as possible and to try and open people's eyes to what we're doing up on the International Space Station. I'm just delighted that I've been able to do that.
Can I ask, how do you feel about the distribution of the roles on the International Space Station? We have, you came down with Commander Tim Kopra. Yuri Melenchenko was a commander on previous missions. You may be a commander at some point. How do you feel about that? Is it a fair distribution? Is it a rota? How does it work?
It's a very fair distribution, and it works really well, actually. But the way it works is we're all. Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, we're obviously all trained up to a certain level across the whole board. So anybody can do an EVA, anybody can do the robotics missions, and anybody can do the science activities that we need to do on board the space station. But somebody needs to command the Soyuz, and that takes a lot of hard work and effort. And clearly, as a Russian vehicle, the Russians do that. And somebody has to command the space station, which is also another big responsibility. But the way that these responsibilities are shared out are very good, because everybody just mucks in and everybody helps out as best as possible. But we're very aware that the commander has the final say when anything happens on board.
But just as a quick follow-up, how does it strike you that a lot of the attention has been on you during this mission, and a lot of the coverage was about you on Saturday and not Yuri Melenchenko and Tim Kopra? As a crew member, as a team member, does that make you feel a little bit uneasy that, we're to blame in a sense, that we focus on one personality? Is that a problem for you when you're doing the science, when you know you're all together in it together?
Do you know, we're very isolated from that, so I'm not even aware of that happening. If anything, when I was on board, the one thing we were aware of was it was actually Scott and Misha, the one-year mission, and quite rightly we were focusing on that, and that was a huge deal. And we were also there to support them. 1 year on board the space station is a long time, so we tried to help them as much as possible. But Scott was an outstanding commander of the space station, and I really learned a huge amount from him in the first 3 months of the mission. So no, we just work together as a team, and we're actually quite isolated from what's happening on Earth. And even if we were aware of it, we wouldn't let that impact on our team operations.
And the next woman commander soon?
Yes.
Very soon?
Yes, with Peggy, who's flying with Tom, I will.
Oh, that's
command.
right, of course, yeah. But sorry, upcoming command. We don't have a lot come up through the ranks. That's what I meant to say. The distribution there between the sexes is not very fair, is it?
Well, it's changing, and in the last NASA selection was 50-50. Yes, it is changing, and we're getting there. And we are trying. The European Space Agency had its selection process, and 20% of females applied, along with the other 8,000, I think 413 or whatever it was, and we ended up with the same ratio out of the final 6 selected. So yes, if we can encourage more women into this sector, then that would be great. And that's certainly very something that's is very pertinent to the UK, because we do have a very low uptake in science, technology, engineering, mathematics subjects with women in the UK. So if we can change that, then we'll hopefully get more women to the sector.
Tim, David talked about the ministerial conference and the pitch that's going to need to be made. What would you say to Joe Johnson about the importance of Britain remaining at the forefront of human space flight now that we have actually started?
Well, as I said before, I think that it's hugely important, because we're making decisions today that will influence what we're doing in 15, 20, 30 years' time. And as we've seen from the International Space Station, once you start building a space station, if you're not involved in that project from the beginning, it's very hard to jump on board later on. It's very hard for the industry to catch up. It's very hard for the scientists to catch up. And so if we're not on board now, we'll miss out on the things that will be happening in the 20s and the things that will be happening in the 30s. And at some point, we'll be too far behind to actually get on board. So I think my point is that we need to be on board right now.
Another question here.
Tim, talk us through the spacewalk. You gripped us all. It seemed really exciting. But what was going through your head? Were you ice cool, Tim, or were you a bit scared, or was it blowing your mind?
It was a whole mixture, really, Palab. I mean, again, from a professional point of view, Tim Kopra and I had rehearsed this so often, that it was so well choreographed. And we had practiced, we have a virtual reality trainer on board the space station, and we had practiced for literally hours doing this spacewalk, every hand grip. It was like a rock climb, and there are a few parts on the translation path where I wasn't happy with. I knew I'd had this big SSU, which weighs an awful lot, and it was going to be very cumbersome. And so I spent hours working out my path, every handhold that I would need to get round there, every place I was going to put my tether. So you know that spacewalk down to every minute detail. When you get out there, you're actually quite relaxed, because finally, after all of the anticipation, and there is, of course, as a first spacewalk, there's nervousness involved, and you're apprehensive. You're in an environment you've never been in before, and so it's wonderful just to be outside and executing the plan that you've trained so long for.
And just a final question from me. What do you think will happen to human spaceflight? Because we've been building a space station. We haven't gone back to the moon. We've had grand plans from David about going to the moon. Do you think that the human race will be able to go to other worlds?
Absolutely, yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And we've made enormous progress on the International Space Station, not just as a scientific laboratory, but also as exploration. And as David said, it's not just exploration by itself, but it's a mixture of exploration and science. And we're at a stage now where we really understand what we're doing to a degree that we're ready for those. We're ready for those next steps. We're ready for the next missions beyond the space station.
Hi, Tim. Kate Stevens. Can I just ask, you've been described as a human guinea pig doing many medical tests on yourself. Can you explain how that will continue in the next 6 months, year? And also on a lighter note, have you learnt anything that you can give us any top tips on?
Well, yes, the human guinea pig, I mean, that's a huge part of what we're doing on the space station for scientific research, is human physiology and life science. And there's an enormous amount to learn about the human body that can have benefits for people back here on Earth. And what's happening in the next 6 months, well, it's happened already. In fact, it started in Karaganda in terms of medical testing. I've already had 2 blood draws this week. I've had a muscle biopsy. I've had MRI scans. This afternoon, we'll be looking at eyesight again, bone density will be assessed in the next coming days. So this first week back is really important to get all of those initial baseline data collection of how I am after 6 months in space. And now over the next 6 months, we'll look at how quickly my body will recover from a 0G environment to a 1G environment. And actually, in the case of bone density, that will go on probably for up to 2 years for full recovery. So these assessments are incredibly important for us to learn as much as we can about the body.
That seems like you learned, I'm here. It seems like you learned really a lot. Like if you had one piece of advice to give to someone that's going to fly, let's say, in about 6 months to space, what would be your one piece of advice to that person?
Well, Thomas doesn't need any advice from me whatsoever. I mean, in all seriousness, I must have said it so many times, but our training is so good. And Thomas, he's been through it all. In fact, he was Andreas's backup, so clearly he went through that backup launch. He's been to his own backup launch very recently, and he's now in his final 6 months just heading up for the space station. So I think there really is the only advice to give is to enjoy every minute of it, because you already know everything you need to know to fly in space, and now it's just a case of just making sure you cement those memories in and take time to enjoy it.
Thomas, this is the kind of advice you're waiting for as an astronaut? You're listening to your fellow space flyers?
Yes, it's hugely important for us to learn from one another, because like Dave pointed out, like Tim reminded us, it's not just an individual adventure. We just don't go to space to have fun and then to enjoy yourself. We're part of a broader program with long-term goals. So in view of this, it's very, very important that we get feedback from the people who have flown, because there's only so much you can learn in a classroom or in a simulator. I mean, where do you hang your towel to make it dry and things like this, and how do you go to the toilets, obviously. So there's stuff that you can only learn through feedback. So I've been paying attention to what Tim was doing on board. When he was doing a PR, I was listening to the message, of course, but I was also looking at the setup, because I know in a few months I'm going to have to do just as well, if that's humanly possible, But yeah, it's a long-term adventure. Today, Tim is coming back and we're happy to have him. I'm lucky enough to be the next one to fly, but the adventure continues. There'll be someone after me and someone after this person. So it's important to have a long-term vision, to have long-term goals, and to have a long-term commitment. So I hope that the excitement that was built up around Tim's mission is going to continue around my mission, not for me, not to make me happy, but because I think it's important. I think what we achieve in space is good for the citizens of Europe, and I think we're doing a lot for them, and I think it sounds very naive, but we're trying to make the world a better place. So that's why I think everybody should be interested in European human spaceflight.
That sounds good. Do we have any other questions? Yes, here, David.
Tim, after this process that you're going through now of readjustment, which obviously isn't easy, and that's after 6 months in space, is it imaginable that someone might go to Mars and take 2 or 3 years on a trip like that? And what kind of readjustment would they have to go through?
It is absolutely imaginable, and that's something that I get a lot of encouragement from as well, having been up with Scott and Misha, and seeing how, firstly, from a psychological point of view, it's very easy to adapt to life in space, and I can see how the time will not be a problem, the time factor. The problems that we have to overcome are the physical problems, radiation exposure on a Mars mission, for example, the logistics, the life science, the 100% closed cycle system that we need to develop, the propulsion technologies to try and reduce the transit times. These are the problems that we're working on, but in terms of psychological problems, I think we've mastered them. In terms of the human and physical fitness, we have got some great countermeasures in place now. What we need to work out is how we make them smaller, lighter, so that we can get the same good countermeasures, but on a vehicle that is destined for Mars, and that will be a challenge. But I think that I feel great today. I'll be able to work in an environment on Mars, but certainly in the first 24 hours on landing, it would be very, very hard. And in particular, it's not a musculoskeletal system. You have the strength to operate. I think it's the vertigo and the dizziness and the nausea that comes with being in this 1G environment. So maybe we'll look at centrifuge on the vehicle, for example, ways of gradually re-stimulating the vestibular system so that you can do that in a more gradual and incremental way, so that finally when you have that landing on Mars, you're in better shape to be able to work right from day one.
Eileen?
Apart from the experiences you had, what about the experiments you worked with? Was it more routine, just to serve the scientists, or were there experiments where you said, "Wow, what's that going on? What is this? What's going to happen with that specific experiment?"
Yeah, that is a great question, and there are certainly some experiments that stand out as having the wow factor. We were involved in over 250 experiments during Expedition 46 and 47, and as I mentioned, on any one day you might be touching 6 or 7 of them. Now, one experiment might just be, from an astronaut's point of view, flicking a couple of switches, monitoring a camera display. It might be very low-level interaction. Other experiments, as David mentioned, might be much more in depth with controlling a rover from the space station and driving that around a Mars yard, where not only does it require a lot of astronaut interaction, but you also get instant feedback. So you find out straight away how that experiment is doing. That's very rewarding, because what happens a lot on the space station is lots of the science that we have done in the last 6 months, we will not even find out the results of those scientific experiments for several years to come. And in some cases, we might just be astronaut number 3 of an experiment that has got 20 astronauts. So the experiment won't even close for another 5 years. So there's a whole different range of experiments that go on. But for example, the European Space Agency airway monitoring experiment, where we use the airlock for the very first time as a hyperbaric chamber, and we're looking at airway inflammation and the causes of airway inflammation. That was a very complex experiment, and it involved a lot of astronaut participation, both outside the the airlock and then inside the airlock. So those are very rewarding experiments to be involved in. And then the other wow factors, of course, we had some flame combustion experiments, and that's just very exciting. We all enjoy things that are visually stimulating, and to be able to see flame burning in a space station in a controlled environment, but it's very exciting. So that probably has a big wow factor.
We have time for 2 more questions, if there are. If not, okay, then if not, Filippo will be very happy, who's watching the schedule. Can I ask you and the photographers to come in the front? We'll make a group picture. If you can just stand up for that photo. Colleagues can come to the front. Yes, did I say? Okay, yes. Okay, we'll start with the group picture. Und dann. Okay. And now we'll do just Thomas and Tim, because the AFP needs that. Hello. Step to the side.
Just a portrait photo of you both.
Yeah, just we'll need to do it here. You need to do it here because Tim is leaving then.
Tim, are you leaving?
Yeah. So it need to be. And Thomas. Yes, we'll do it tomorrow. You have time. And where's Filippo? Filippo, your turn. Yeah, okay. Filippo, just step aside. Okay, thank you very much. Tim, thank you very much everyone for coming. Bravo Tim again.
I didn't realize you gave me a music. Yeah, no, it was very funny. I saw an artist like, that's great. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, take care. Good luck.
Thanks for everything. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you later.
Thanks, Tim. Let's go.